It was silent that night. Everyone was sure to stay indoors. Not a single human nor plaguer could be seen in the city. There's an old legend, they would say. You are to stay indoors when daylight was no longer shining, and when the moon is most visible in the sky. You won't see a single cloud nor star. If you were to ever ask why, the belief is the moon is an open gateway. A gateway to a goddess, who would let her children play on earth before calling them back home, taking more home along the way. Which goddess, you may also find yourself asking? Life, they would say, the goddess of life. No one argued of her existence, but many were still skeptical. However, it had become a tradition. No one is to disturb the goddess or her children. No one knows the consequences of such a sin, but that's about to change. Dewey usually wasn't bothered by Assassin's irregular sleeping patterns. He would stay up all night and sleep half of the morning away. However, just like everyone else, she followed the legend religiously. "Bed," she boldly stated, swinging his door wide open. He was parallel to where she was standing. He was just hanging upside down, his feet hooked to the edge of the bed to keep him still of his position. "What's this?" she asked him. "What's what?" "You! I told you to get ready for bed ages ago. You're still in your sweaty outfit." He rolled his eyes, but slid off from the bed to change clothes. "Teenagers," Dewey complained under her breath before leaving the room. Assassin called out to her, "Hey, there's a little thing called knocking. You should try it sometime." He only heard another door slam as a response. Assassin and Dewey's relationship was up for debate, and Assassin has found himself questioning it frequently. Then again, if he just had to live with someone, it would be Dewey. She's like the mother he never had, despite looking around the same age. However, looks aren't everything these days, as Dewey technically isn't a person at all, but a thing. A very, very old thing. Around 1,600 years old. Society has classified these things as plaguers, but in due time scientists have found them to be so different that they're now something of their own. Humanoid Jim, also referred by the people as the Gems, masters of deception and shape-shifting. They could hide as anyone as they pleased. Having been around far longer than anyone, their experience on Earth far surpassed any human that has ever lived or ever will live. People call them gems due to the fact every single one of them has a jewel planted on their human-like bodies. It's these embedded jewels that give gems the ability to walk and communicate like any other human. It's impossible to determine what exactly are gems. Maybe they aren't just things, perhaps creatures amongst themselves, but no one will ever truly know for sure. Having changed out of his clothes, Assassin threw himself onto his bed and laid there, fully awake. It wasn't comfortable by any means. The mattress itself wasn't in the best shape, but all his sheets were new. He twisted around in them, getting the fabrics tangled multiple times before finally giving up and looking towards the open window. He started rewinding the day's events in his head. The girl came into mind almost immediately, and he sighed in relief as he could think about her freely without Dewey's presence pressuring him to forget. He first thought about her eyes, how unreal they looked to his own, even though he had an abnormal color of eyes. They had hypnotized him instantly, and before he knew it, he couldn't find an exit from them. And good God, that smile and laugh. He could have sworn he heard it on replay every minute of the day forward, but put it on pause once he felt the blood rush to his cheeks. He let himself marvel in his thoughts for a while before he caught himself on his ridiculousness. The reality of him praising a human was an ideal unfamiliar that came with unfamiliar feelings. Feelings that he didn't know the words for besides nervousness. Little did he know, it was love. He helped with dressing Kara in her old clothing from when she was a child. A silky, off-white colored, loose-fitted nightgown with floral embroidery. Kara had picked it out herself. She loved seeing flowers in pictures and was full of pure joy to be wearing something other than rough rags. The gown was long on Kara. She was short for a child her age, and had to be carried to bed. He laid her down and used her hand to push her front hairs back. "Comfy?" she asked softly. Kara wanted to talk, but only nodded tiredly in response. Good, he said with a smile, and lit a candle for her, and cracked the shutters of the windows open before making her exit. Kara didn't take a second to hesitate, and almost fell asleep soon after, listening to the slight ruffle of the dancing leaves just outside. However, a different sound jolted her awake as the leaves had lost their passion to dance. She had no idea how to describe it in her head in order to process it, so she crept over to the window to investigate. Something about the vision of the wilderness at night seemed mystical. The moon brought a soft blue glow to the rather dark night. It had illuminated everything clearly, as if it were still day. Kara smiled once again, before she heard that same sound from just minutes earlier. For a second, she thought it was familiar, but being uncertain didn't settle right with her. Kara had to know exactly what it was. She hastily made her way out the front door, quietly and barefooted. She had felt the moon's warmth on her skin, along with its gentle breeze. Following the direction of the sound, she carefully maneuvered through the thickened forest, avoiding all the dangers underneath her feet and within her body's vicinity. Once out from the forest, the noise was most clear. It was humming. It was nothing like Kara had heard before, and her curiosity had only enticed her and forced her body to keep moving. It wasn't until she had conquered the hill that separated the forest from the city did she see what was happening this night. People. So many people. They looked just as blue as the night's glow. Children ran and played in the fields of grass. Adults socialized with one another, and the elders just embraced the scenery. They walked on the earth's ground, but none of it made a sound. Kara could clearly see their mouths move, but no noise. She had never seen the city so lively, yet so quiet. She carefully inched her way forward towards the crowd of unfamiliar people. Although she couldn't hear them, it was evident they could certainly hear her approaching. Children were at a standstill, their mouths no longer moving, and the elders focused their viewing eyes on her. Kara didn't take the time to look at their faces. She could only follow the beautiful humming. It grew louder, and she was finally able to see the source of the enchanting music. What stood before her was a tall woman, who wasn't blue like the other people she had seen. The woman had long, curly, and medium ash blonde hair, styled into a waterfall braid. She wore an off-shoulder maxi dress of pure white and silvers, and a gold cutout of a full moon rested in the center of the outfit near her chest. She faced away from Kara, but when she had turned around, Kara observed her gentle eyes were in fact amber in color. Her name was Neoma Luna, the goddess of life who resided on the moon. She was tender and cared for all her children, young, old, tall, and short. Human or plaguer, she couldn't care less. Neoma knelt down on one knee to examine Kara's features, holding out her arms, touching her face gently and stroking her hair. "You poor thing," was all she could say. Kara didn't know how to respond to what she said, but her eyes were practically sparkling. "You're a fairy!" she cheered excitedly. "You are real! I knew you were!" Neoma could only chuckle. "You must be Kara. You know my name?" "I sure do, my child. Come, there's something I want you to see." She held Kara's hand as she reluctantly tailed behind her. Kara couldn't imagine what the fairy wanted to show her. She had secretly hoped that the woman would raise a wand from her pocket and give her the happy ending of a story she could only ever read about. The people who dotted the city also followed behind her. They were intrigued by the human they had heard so much about. Many whispered to themselves or to one another, but Kara couldn't hear a word that was said. Neoma led her directly under the moon's soft light and let go. Kara stared at her blankly as she started speaking. "I need you to do something for me." It'll be very challenging and you will have to be brave. Kara, this isn't something that you can do without thinking. Please, think about your decision before you give me an answer. Kara thought about it for a minute. Bravery wasn't something she knew much about, but kindness was. She knew the fairy needed help by the look in her eyes. Kara knew a fake smile when she saw one. Her face was quivering, the corners of her lips bended, and the perspiration formed on her forehead. She wasn't sure what favor this fairy needed, but she knew in her heart that she was the only person willing to do it. Kara formed the brightest smile she could manage with the utmost confidence in her voice. "I'll do it!" Naoma wasted no time. She took Kara's hand, gently forced her palm open, and placed a small object into it. "In return for your bravery and heart of pure gold, I offer your family's everlasting love, happiness, and protection. Your good attracts the evil of this world, and by God, I beg of you to save us all." Kara couldn't even begin to understand what on earth she said, but before she knew it, Naoma blew into Kara's face. A blue mist consumed her body and put her into a deep slumber. It lifted her centimeters off the ground and gracefully drifted her back to where she was earlier that night, over the hill, through the forest, the front door, and then finally back to bed. Naoma stood tall, confident of her choice of character, before facing her people. "It's time to go home," she said reassuringly. "It's in good hands now." The soft blue glow lessened as they disappeared, 1 by 1, then 2 by 6, until finally it looked as if they were never present to begin with. Kara woke up the next morning, unable to remember a single thing.